Well, good evening. Welcome to the Expire Show brought to you by the Science Center Singapore, the Singapore Institute of Technology and Aeronautics. This week, Singapore Air Show, lots of talks about flying car over Marina Bays, possibly in 2024. But tonight, we are talking about ocean. What is ocean? And what is this pixel doing in the ocean, or OceanPixel? All right? Well, that's a very interesting name. Maybe we should talk to its founder and figure out what it represents, Dr. Michael Abundo. All right, let's move on. Hi, Mike. Great to have you on the show.
Hello. Nice to see you again, Prof. Neo.
Well, so in this show, we explore innovation, entrepreneurship, especially deep tech, and ocean, which is big, pixel, which is small and digital, analog, digital, coming together. What's it all about?
Yeah, you got that really well, Prof. Neo. Honestly, took us some time to think about that name. OceanPixel is a company that focuses on sustainability. And you know, ocean represents the vastness of things, right? As you mentioned, the pixel is a representation. And people say a picture represents 1,000 words, but pictures are made of lots and lots of pixels. So data and information is important for sustainability. So we try and merge these two and try to make sense of the vastness of things, especially now where sustainability is something that people talk about, using digital tools, digitalization and transformation, and how we can hybridize and marry those two. So
that's great. So in this show, we will let you have the stage to introduce yourself. So take it away.
So you can call me Mike. My full name is Michael Lochinvorsim Abundo. There's bits and pieces there of American, Scottish, Chinese heritage, but I am Filipino. So coming from the 7,107 islands of the Philippines, obviously that has very close ties to my heart as well, Prof. Neo. So I am an engineer by background, focus on electrical and electronics engineering, and I did some research work in the field of renewable energy, particularly marine renewable energy. I was a research fellow in Nanyang Technological University, and during that period, we spun off OceanPixel to commercialize a dissertation, my thesis, to look into suitability analytics and use of tools to accelerate the development.
So you did your PhD or postdoc in NTU?
I did my PhD. It was a sandwich program between the University of the Philippines, Diliman, as you know, and also Nanyang Technological University. And then my research fellowship was with the Energy Research Institute at NTU.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So during the course of that work, I decided to develop further this idea of using digital tools, geographic information systems. Back then, analytics was still a little bit new, and how we can help project developers in harnessing resources in the marine space, particularly ocean energy, which we know can enable a lot of other things in the blue economy. So that's my background, and if you don't mind, Prof. Nyo, yeah, you can see here that OceanPixel has been a Singapore startup. It's a spin-off of NTU, and we have been around since 2014. And back then, we just focused on looking at marine renewable energy, but we found out that there are many aspects that people want to do in the marine space, such as electrification of vessels, coastal development, port, jetty, you know. And those aspects also need, well, not just energy, but also need some form of sustainability planning. You know, fish farms are going from near shore to offshore as well, and there's a lot of offshore development. And 10 years ago, when people talk about offshore energy, they always think about oil and gas, right? Yeah. But nowadays, with the proliferation of turbines and tidal energy, wave energy, right, ocean thermal energy. So these different technologies have matured as well to a certain level where they are now considered to be part of the options that people can choose. So we decided to make it easy for people who want to develop projects to gain the necessary intelligence for them to make decisions. So if you don't mind, I continue. Yeah. So OceanPixel wants to enable sustainability through data intelligence, and we not really boast, but we consider ourselves as specialists. So primarily energy engineers who have expertise there in renewable energy, energy efficiency, But in the broader sense, we want to be considered as sustainability specialists with technical backing in engineering. But we know that the sustainability agenda requires innovation as well. Innovation, technopreneurship, right? Those need to be harmonized with research and enterprise as well. So I admire the fact that, Prof. Nyo, you have something really innovative here in not only the transport sector, but looking at, logistics, for instance. And I think if we port and marry certain ideas in different spaces, there could be a lot of synergies that we could expect. Yeah. And if I may dive a little bit in our journey, merging oceans, marine space, and data can be applied to, let's say, marine projects. Sure, that's easy enough. But there's a different context as well in terms of oceans. If you're a computer science guy, you know that there's a terminology being used by data scientists called data lakes. And data lakes represent data that have more or less some in a siloed form, but it's not structured. It could be structured, could be not structured. What about we think about data oceans of data? So there could be relationships between them, not necessarily into just lakes, but the body of water could be a one massive interconnected data ocean. And so that ocean of data actually exists. It exists. And people can fish out different things there, make sense of different things there. But we need to harness as much as we can in this data revolution stage, right?
It's very interesting because, when people are doing fossil fuel exploration and oil and gas, and they use a lot of data, right? Seismic data and all this, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and now we are moving away from that, and then if you're moving to alternative energies, and you really need data, right? You need to know where is the right spot to collect energy, right?
That's true.
Yeah, so it's about speed, mass of water flowing, that kind of stuff.
That's correct, yeah, Prof. I mean, even in offshore wind, which is now commercial, they also need to know where is the best place to develop a wind farm. And you won't put it in an area where there's no resource. That's one, right? So you have to know not just the resource, the flow of this type of fluid, could be wind, could be water, of course, but for offshore wind, the site selection is not just about where the highest energy is. It's also about are there navigational constraints? Is the seabed shallow? Is it deep? Are there environmental concerns around the area? So you put all of these layers together and you end up with a multi-stakeholder, multi-data layer, multi-criteria.
So are you going to be the Google of ocean?
Well, we would like to we are aspiring to be that, yes, and I think we focus on tools because, so we aspire for a good world, better world, more sustainable one, and not just for today, but also for our future. That being said, a lot of the development and management of sustainability initiatives these days are actually slow, complicated, and manual. And that's the reason why we thought that maybe there is a space for digital tools to come in. And that's what people have been trying to do these days, but they come from either a non-sustainability specialist background, so they may have really cool toys or tools, AI, machine learning, analytics, dashboarding, etc. But then they can't stitch it together because they need subject matter experts to sort of make sense of what they're doing. Yeah, we come from the other end, whereas we are sustainability specialists with already some technical background about these things, and we kind of know which tools make sense for it. It's like a doctor, right? So someone designed the instruments of a doctor, of a surgeon, but did not have the medical knowledge to do so. It would be very hard and maybe end up with something that's not usable, you know. So I think given this, there are different ecosystems, and this is just one example that I'm showing here on screen that speaks about renewable energy. At the core, a renewable energy project developer needs to talk to a lot of stakeholders. Could be the technology provider, could be the consultants, could be the engineering, procurement, construction companies, it could be the government, could be the financiers, and all of those have some, in one way or another, need information coming from the data, but also need some knowledge, some wisdom around it, and typically these makes the due diligence pack for such projects to become reality. And so what would typically be done is a lot of pre-feasibility studies, a lot of pre-development work before a project can be closed and then be built. So what we want to do here is shorten that, make that also cheaper, and make that as accessible to people who want to develop these types of sustainability projects. So the merging of data intelligence for sustainability, not something new. I spoke about data lakes and the oceans of data. Now this needs to be seen in multiple ecosystems, obviously, not just in the marine side, but it's happening even in the land side, the green island, the green cities, the smart city space, you know, electric vehicles, green buildings, and all of that. So people think of us as OceanPixel just being in the marine space. Actually, the same technology could be applied already to these types of cities. So it's very interesting because we have this rapid, simple digital ecosystem that generates intelligent insights for these types of users who want to make sense of lots and lots of data and specific for their use. And that really then gives way to some form of time savings on their end, you know, and cost savings as well. And in reality, our clients and customers have come to have like 50%, 30 to 50% reduction in terms of time and also in terms of cost. And that's good because we can have more projects rolled out, you know, and we become part of that ecosystem. So we want to equip a lot of advisors and consultants with these tools, you know, so that we enhance the way that they deliver services. Now, marine renewable energy is just one of those industries that have actually utilized our expertise. Coming from this sort of space, we knew that there was something missing in progressing deployments of technologies. You know, people mistake marine renewable energy as ocean energy. Actually, they're not the same. So marine renewable energy is renewable energy production which makes use of marine resources or space, right? But there could be different types of technologies like marine floating solar, very famous, offshore wind, also in the marine space. But the International Energy Agency defines ocean renewable energy as something in principle that uses resources that are in the ocean or in the sea. So the solar uses the sun, and the wind uses wind, which is not necessarily at sea. Whereas when you have currents, whether it's tidal currents or ocean currents or waves, so the principle is a bit different, or the thermal gradient at sea, or even the salinity, you know. So they just categorize it that way by definition. So it's a subset. So ocean renewable energy is a subset of marine renewables, and I just want that to be out there. And this talk of sustainability in the oceans is a precursor to something bigger. And you may not have heard of the blue economy just yet, but this is just an analog to green economy and blue economy. So this is the economy, the sustainability economy in, let's say, coastal, nearshore, and offshore spaces. And this diagram, I love it so much, you know, it kind of walks you through the different aspects of a blue economy. Energy is there for sure, vessel transport is there, electrification of those as well, production of food, right, water, the interaction of livelihood and industry, communities, recreation. So to a certain extent, environment, this infinity symbol of the blue economy makes it succinct enough to speak about the onward journey of making things as sustainable now and in the future begins really with a different type of mindset. And so that mindset is obviously coming from a lot of expertise, but also coming from a lot of evidence, and that data is important. Shown in this slide are some pilot projects that people can do or are doing already that combines technology, applications, business models, and sites, you know. So you might want to do a combination of, oh, why don't have a renewable energy for a fish farm, you know, and produce not just electricity, but also water. Could be desalination, some brackish water for the fish would be good, you know, and then the fish could be in self-contained platforms similar to what Singapore has been doing, and without any sort of waste, you know. So the circular economy can be applied here. So I love the fact that technology can now be used in quote-unquote traditional aspects like farming, you know, smart farming, sure. Smart fish farming, why not, right? Then what about the restoration or the, should we say the the preservation of natural resources, like coral reefs, for instance, right? So you can use technologies like underwater cameras, fish counting, estimation of carbon capture, right? And people have been talking about mangroves and the blue carbon, the blue carbon economy, sequestration of those, and people have wanted to tokenize certain carbon abatement stuff, you know. So okay, that's good, you know, if it builds the ecosystem and also I think the broadcasting of sustainability and brings it to the table. Actually, those are all good things. So I digress a little bit. So OceanPixel would want to look at, you know, platforms that could utilize any cloud-based host or solution and deploy a lot of the algorithms and tools. And this is just an example of what it could be for marine renewables and the blue economy. Now, if you change this to something else, if you wanted it to be in aerospace, for instance, the sustainability in aerospace, you could have something similar as well. But probably that's not where we are yet. So someone else can take this on, no problem. And I feel like our journey has been something which we would want to help inspire other technopreneurs as well. We were a handful of folks, no capital. We were poor, you know. Just like any startup, I think you have this idea, you have this vision, and you want to bring it forward, you know. And so we took a risk, and we said, in our first year, let's just get it out there, you know, see if people are interested. And our very first client said, we really like this fact that you can give us a lot of intelligence in this area, but that was more of a consulting gig, you know. Yes. And it started off as, hey, you know what, yeah, we'll pay you 800 euros per month over a year, right? Keep feeding us a lot of the data. Interesting, okay. So there was that space of, we just want to know more about the region because there's not a lot of information out there, but we knew where they were, and we actually did publicly mine a lot of this data, right? And basically process them into data and report products that people started procuring from us. But they didn't want it for just the data. They want someone to explain to them the data as well. Someone to explain to them what it meant, you know, for either their machines. Does that mean we have 50% of the market, right? Does that mean that these sites are suitable for me, or yes or no? And where are the networks, you know? So it's a combination of consulting and market assessment and sort of pre-development work. And for us, I think at the end of the day, we learned a lot over the past 7 years of engaging with these types of clients. They've never actually utilized the tool itself by themselves because they always want us to operate it. Yeah. So now what we're thinking of with all these clients, maybe we can look at some focus industry sectors and say, can we now transfer some of our know-how and intelligence into maybe an AI agent or a specialist practitioner, a digital consultant, so to speak. And I think we can deploy it in different segments, depending on the specialization, So if we transfer a lot of the consulting knowledge and know-how into something in this space, probably we'll probably spend 90% less time sort of in more traditional questions. So that's sort of how we got into some of these spaces, because people were referring us here and there to do the same methodology, look at suitability analytics for these particular segments. And now in 2021, we pivoted to less consulting work, more sort of digitalization work, and we got clients even outside the marine space, like H&M. You'd never think OceanPixel and H&M seems like a little bit far off, but it's the principle of bringing data intelligence into their sustainability processes that actually brought them to us, So we have number of these folks that we work with, and in 2022 we do have some projects sort of in the pipeline. We are now collaborating very closely with Hitachi, because Hitachi also wants to look at digital tools for the blue economy specifically. Some of the work and projects that we have are specific to Singapore's agenda, but there are folks outside in Southeast Asia that we service as well, such as the Blue Economy CRC, that's a research center in Australia, and they are a 10-year program, which we are one of the industry partners. They are trying to look out for what might be the roadmap for Australia and the wider Australasia, I would say, in terms of blue economy practices, and there is no platform. There is no blue economy digital platform. So right now we are sort of in that space. So the team, as you can see, has grown from just 5 people before. My co-founders are probably these 3 that you see, gentlemen here below, and then we added on new advisors as well. And we are in the midst of making sure that we ourselves are sustainable as a business, but at the same time have still the passion to grow into the areas where we're not yet that fully developed. Our journey has taken us from 2014 all the way to today to a number of niche areas, I would say, but the learning that we've gotten was so valuable that I think this session may not be enough, but there are key things that would be notable to share, at least with our audience here or cohort here, that sometimes people probably go against your dreams. Many a time they will not see it as you see it, right? But you need to have the grit and perseverance, and if you believe in something that well, and you know that it can impact the world, make a dent a little bit and contribute back to society, well, who's there to stop you but yourself, really? So with that, I think I end my presentation, Prof. Nyo. I mean, feel free to ask me anything, of course.
Okay, interesting. Now I can see that, it's quite a journey, right? It's 2014, right? And 2014, and then you have developed the technology, you have moved on to markets, not just local, but international, not just in Asia. And it's also a very interesting proposition that you sort of move your business beyond the oceans. Now, I like there's this terminology that you use called the digital ocean, and it's like digitizing the ocean, right? Which is a vast thing to do. I know, because I have another guest that a couple of months back, and we came out with a concept called a digital forest.
Wow.
So we know what are the status of forests, and it's like what we talk about salinity, we talk about the temperature, we talk about the gas, the surrounding, so that we can prevent another forest.
Very interesting, yeah. I mean, that is one of the things that we're working on with Marine Science Institute of the Philippines, to, people talk about digital twins now, right?
Yeah, digital twins.
So can you not do a digital twin of an environment, right? So we're not even talking about the whole ocean, just, you know, coral reefs,
Yes.
the coral triangle, right? So if you can do that and monitor their health, right, you'd have basically an accountable way of saying that this is still healthy or this is now in danger.
Tourists will not come anymore. It will be a great application for the Great Barrier Reef. They will know that, okay, this month don't go up this place, let it grow back, you know. Yeah. Okay, that's very interesting. Maybe we start off with 2014, right, when you first start up, right? It is, actually what's your dream, right? You study a PhD and then you become an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You want to be a professor?
No, actually, so I used to teach in the University of the Philippines, and I realized that, yeah, sure, I would like to share knowledge, but probably not just in the university setting. So I felt like there was a gap in the doing part. And the doing part, being the glue of academe, industry, and government, I find myself really, really attracted to that space and that role. And I feel like Singapore has been such an influence to me on that aspect, because the triple helix approach, where you have academic, industry, and government working together, it's not something that a lot of developing countries still do, I would say.
Yeah, because the academia is still in the ivory tower.
Yeah, and the industry seem to be wanting to do their own thing as well. And the government wants to fund the academia, but they're trying to encourage cooperation, but yet the design of their programs is not yet as intertwined. You know?
Well, sometimes, of course, in the academia, they are searching for new knowledge, and the industry is looking for application, and there's a gulf, right? And that's where you comes in, right? Bridge the things. So now, so when you are doing your research in the Energy Research Institute in NTU, right? So how do you sort of look for, you know, that, okay, my research has commercial application. What trigger you?
That's a very good question, Prof. Nyo. Honestly, in NTU, I think this is a joke I heard the ex-president Bertil back then. Yeah, he said that in NTU we do only two types of research: applied research and the not yet applied research.
No basic.
Yeah. So everything is for application, right? So I said, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, you know. And so while doing my research fellowship, I obviously thought that if we're going to contribute to impacting or having certain outcomes, right? One of the best ways to do that is to make sure that certain types of technologies or know-how reaches the industry, because they can be the one to scale things, you know. So, and I saw that in other technologies of the university that were either commercialized or spun off. I was so inspired with Freddie Bowie's example, for instance, you know, the heart, the material, and all that. I said, wow, these are excellent, you know, great success stories. And my thinking was that if maybe I could move a little bit this marine energy, marine renewable energy, or the sustainability agenda, even a little bit, you know, that would be so fulfilling, not only for me, but for maybe whoever has prepared me in my life journey, you know. So the commercialization piece came as a natural sequence, subsequence, if you may, to the research, innovation, and then sort of application journey. That gap in between obviously is either technopreneurship or commercialization or technology transfer, right? So that kind of got me interested a little bit about how to do that, you know, how to do that. Before Singapore, there was a bunch of speakers who came from Silicon Valley, went to the Philippines, from the likes of Plug and Play Tech Center, you know, and they were, and there was also, there were also brilliant Filipinos who wanted to give back to the Philippines. And one of the things they instituted was we need to have more graduate students in our masters and PhDs because it seems like there's a brain drain that's happening and the knowledge is not here to be able to look at, high value sort of knowledge economy stuff. And that was something that they put in some money and the government matched it or something, and that became one of the scholarship programs for engineering, which I was part of. And because of that, I feel like I feel so indebted to people wanting to give back, that I also want to give back, and the best way that I know how is to be that glue in the middle of research and sort of academe, industry, and government. Whether it's here in Singapore or maybe back in the Philippines, we've been trying to push these ecosystems around. And one good example of doing something like that would probably be starting from my own expertise. So I thought about it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because you sort of sequence it, but I still find that from a researcher drawing a salary from the university, consistent salary, and then jumping out into setting up a company, suddenly you're responsible for your own salary.
That's correct, but I was a bit lucky because the university was supportive of spin-offs. Yeah. So what they did was, while you're still starting up, you retain your researcher role, spend part of your time in trying to develop access to this and bring back maybe research projects to the university, because so then that setup really worked very well.
So it allows a smooth transition.
Yes. Transition towards something a bit more full-time, and it allowed us to build teams, and NTU was one of the first ones in 2016 to put in some pre-seed funding for us, a strategic research investment fund.
So the transition from a researcher to a CEO who have now not just no more looking at research, but looking at projects and then negotiate for, selling you a product, bill you for this invoice. How's the change?
Oh, I can tell you that was a difficult change because being a researcher, you're kind of used to getting grants and then using and spending the money.
Like it's just a budget.
Right? You manage the spending, right? And that's cool. Yeah. You never need to worry about, okay, where does the money come from? Whether clients will pay you on time or not, right? Because there's always a big brother behind you that's sort of supporting you. So I have no formal training in business back then, and I realized that, there's so much that you can learn from actually doing stuff. And I kind of already had a PhD then, but I said, maybe I need to enroll myself in this technopreneurship and innovation program, this master's program that NTU has, to try it out, because they seem to have some skill sets in accounting and, business planning and all of that, which you learn on the fly. Well, yeah, you're not really trained up. Of course, a lot of the accelerators and incubators back then, they will offer you programs, but it's always these short courses and et cetera, right? So yeah, I did that as well. I mean, probably a lot of technopreneurs want to self-learn because that's how people survive, yeah. And so the transition for me, because I had the habit already of doing my own research, it probably helped me cope a little bit and still retain my sanity while being sort of managing director and a CEO. It was tough to manage cash flow, right? Very tough to do that because you have to go down to the nitty-gritty stuff, It's not like you plan for it and it's gonna come. No, you have to chase after it. So a lot of the practical aspects of running the business probably was learned on the fly. And I had colleagues, my first employees, who were a little bit risk averse about these things, So they would never commit to, okay, going to meet people, even if it's outside Singapore, on the mere chance that you might land a deal or might strike a strategic partnership. They feel like we probably shouldn't do that until we have money and then go there. And you kind of need to spend and to be able to introduce yourself to other people and meet who are in the industry and know how to position yourselves, you know?
Right.
So, and that was one of the earliest things that we did, you know, to get the word out there that, hey, we're here, we're in Southeast Asia, and you can look to us if you want to do marine renewable energy and sustainability in this region, right? So we were very early then. We were like, people were not talking about SDGs or the decade of ocean sustainability. It wasn't there.
Yeah, yeah. I find a very interesting concept because this ocean data thing is that how many people are, I mean, how many companies are in the world are really doing this?
Yeah. Well, if you did your market research well, as we would have, in this space, there are probably like 100 to 200 companies that are interested in ocean data, but in different focus industries, right? And out of these, probably we're looking at 20 who are quite good in terms of making sense of that data and giving it to the industry, right? So that's awesome, right? But they're a little bit siloed, and so nowadays it's application specific, and the companies could either be working for oil and gas a lot or for offshore projects, right? Exploration or vessels, could be logistics companies, for instance, could be subsea work as well, piping and all these things.
Yeah, so that's the interesting part, right? Because we understand that the technology can be applied because it's basically, I mean, the in its purest form is data analytics. It's, you know, it doesn't matter where your data come from, but you can analyze, right? So I think therein lies the dilemma that you have the computing platform and the analytics platform, and then you have the domain knowledge, right? So the domain knowledge of the ocean. So obviously one option is I stick to the ocean and I have domain expertise and I become, as I say, Google of the, of the ocean, right? Ocean data. And the other way that you choose is to say, okay, I have the analytics platform and I have the ocean knowledge. Now I can branch into other stuff. But you need to build lots of knowledge here, right? So how do you make decision?
So we put our cards on the table a lot of times, and Prof, you know, honestly, we start with what we know, yeah. And so because we know energy engineering, we know renewable energy so much, so we hinge on that knowledge, and from that we sort of branch out. Say, okay, we know energy. What are things that need energy besides the energy projects themselves producing energy? That's okay, right? So you're talking about, okay, services or applications of where the electricity is used. Islands, cool. Islands, what do they need? Obviously, each island needs its own electricity supply, microgrid. So now you're talking about power systems, right? Then outside of that, the transport services, and then as I mentioned, the food production, water production. Then now after all of that, you're really looking at livelihood as well, right? So then comes the social innovation side of things and communication. There are cell phone towers in there that are also powered by electricity. So a lot of the clients become now, instead of just renewable energy project developers, to, let's say, people who use the electricity. And it could be the local businessman, right? But more often than not, it's the bigger companies, someone like Globe or Smart, the telco companies, right? They suddenly look at, oh, we don't need to transport diesel anymore to the island just to power our thing. Yeah, you just produce locally, right? And then that's it. Wow, okay. And then there's community engagement. Okay, cool. So for us, the decision of merging, let's say, domain expertise with digital tools and then just choosing the application, probably there was a strategic planning and weighing as well. Where do we want to be, right? So what is our vision?
What's your North Star?
Yeah. Because what is the moonshot that we have, right? As you mentioned, do we want to be the Google of ocean? Actually, that played a little bit in our minds, do we really want to be that? And the answer was, maybe no. Maybe we want to be the conduit to whoever that may be, the Google of ocean data, and become maybe the API, the pipes, or conduits to real users, applications of these things, right? So whether you're a resort owner or the one that operates, in the Philippines, there are people who operate they call it the ATM, but it stands for automatic too big machine, water machine. Too big is water. So the ATM is you drop 5 peso coin and then you get 1 bottle of water. Yeah. So in islands and in places where water is scarce, this is a bit famous, but it's essentially a big jug that they bring in there and then they put it like a top-up thing, you know. So if you have local businesses like that and you're able to inform them about things, you know, and improve the way that they work, we chose to be closer to this application side, yeah, rather than on the sort of a bit highfalutin side of things, you know. We think that may be a different entity altogether. But building this conduit, etc., I think it's more realistic for us because we get to touch base with real customers, real clients, right? And they know sort of what we do with, quote unquote, the ocean of data that will be available, right? But we start with what they need.
Okay, great. 2 questions before we end. Yeah. First is, I mean, throughout the years, right, what's the philosophy and how do you manage the staff, build the team? How do you gel them together?
Okay. Managing people is a bit tricky, but there is this middle ground concept all the time. So we obviously have partners also in the UK who like the term alignment so much, and this term which we use in internal to the company is connectioneering, connection engineering, right?
Yeah. Engineer like to whatever something nearing. It's like I was like doing say imagination. Oh, let's try imagineering.
Disney, right? So I think in human factors and human engagements, you kind of want to always have a middle ground on something. There's a way to not always win, but also not always lose. But as long as you are wanting a common goal, that's important, right? So if the commonality is not selfish, you find that you can always resolve things. But the moment that the mindset is not a growth mindset, it's closed, it's fixed and all that, it's very hard for other people to understand. So you kind of need to talk them through it and maybe even let them go if they're not fitting into the team. And we have all sorts of folks, right? And anyone from the very young, like 18 years old, all the way to like 65 years old who are in our team. So there's a lot of ideas in there, but everyone has this growth mindset in place. And so the middle ground, making sure that we are able to find that middle ground is and the method, you know, the approach of how you deal with things, even if it's not a nice conversation, you respect each other. Yeah. So I think that is at the core of our connectioneering exercise, you know, when we talk about that. So that was your first question, Prof.
Yeah. And the last question will be like, it's always the typical last question. What are the 3 challenges going forward?
Okay, both for me personally and I guess for OceanPixel as well. The first one is growth, right? So the challenge of growth obviously has a lot of nuances under that, whether it's resources, like investment is required or financing is required for a project. There are projects that can't move because we don't have the working capital to do so, but we already have the deal, you know, so growth will all.
That's easy when you have the deal. It's probably easy
we
to get
can talk
resource.
more about that, Prof, after this. So because there is something that we are working on in Singapore, and that's quite easy. So that growth thing is there's always going to be challenges. Second is people.
Sure.
People. And in your growth journey, of course, you need to look at the right people. People may come and go, but to retain good people, right? even though they want to work with you, even if sometimes they don't mind not getting paid. They just believe in it so much and they believe in you so much. But you want it to be supportive of them as well in their career, in their families, right? You don't want them to be hungry at any point in time. So you have to take care of people, and that's gonna be tough because whether you, sometimes you personally need to sacrifice your own resources to be able to make sure that they don't, you know, go hungry, for instance, right? So I guess the third one is, I wouldn't say credibility, but I think the ecosystem. So the building of this ecosystem, which we've started way back in 2014, obviously we'll have naysayers, right? And we'll have people or organizations who just don't think that that it makes sense to them, you know. But show, right? Show, don't tell, right? And so sooner or later, just like this wonderful piece of invention and work here, when you show people, then they believe.
Yeah, I think that's true.
When you show them, then they believe. So getting to that point where we can show them things is not an easy journey, obviously.
I agree, especially engineer. We like to show people what can be done rather than talk about it. All right, so thank you very much for coming on our show and also show and tell at the same time. And for the guys on the in front of your screen watching us, thank you for joining us and hope to see you next week. Next week we are looking at a firm that is very interesting. You know, we are all in 3 dimensions, but this guy is going to talk about 4th dimension.